Hey, Guoba here, back for an updated guide. I actually did a mini update recently after the Dahlia, but I didn't expect a whole Novaflare 2, and she got a pretty good one considering she's already potent. Let's check out what changes she got, how much better she got in my calculations, as well as anything new we should be doing with her builds. Like and sub to catch the other Novaflare guides, and let's begin. So first off, we have to check out what's new. Before, she would apply fire weakness to the target selected, and only them despite being a blast attack, which made sense back in the day. Implanting 3 times per skill would have been crazy after Boot Hill released just before her. Now, pre-Nova, she at least could ignore the toughness of enemies on either side like a mini implant, but they sent it, and post-Nova Firefly will be able to apply fire weakness on all 3 targets she hits. More toughness, but also her fire ally friends can now help, as they can't necessarily ignore toughness like she could in the past. This also gets even stronger when considering the Dahlia's Firefly specific traits, as these enemies will now also receive a chunky flat toughness hit from the Dahlia on top of the new weakness. Before, side enemies during your enhanced skill could avoid breaks, and now they can no longer. Combined with the E2 change later, this really feels like a pure fiction Novaflare. And her ultimate ability didn't change. Sadly, we got no Currency Wars ability, but technically her ult mechanics did change with the new E2. Since we can implant fire weakness wherever, her E2 is now changed to first give us a 25% break effect buff. This is honestly pretty cool, as in some more unhinged Firefly teams, she would struggle hitting her super break multiplier break effect breakpoint. For most people though, this is just a small damage increase that we'll take. The other change on this trace is interesting, but also kind of bizarre. She already got new speed breakpoints with the Dahlia, and this actually kinda hurts her in some places. At a first glance, we can see that we get a delay on the combustion countdown, and that sounds nice, right? More time in the ult. Let's look a bit deeper though. Every weakness break on a target with her enhanced abilities will delay the countdown by 10% up to 3 times. Her ult countdown at a base has a speed of 70, so the AV it finishes at is 10,000 divided by 70, or around 142.86. This is conveniently right in the 0 cycle breakpoint of 150 AV, and don't worry, it doesn't hurt just 0 cycles. If you break a single enemy, this AV goes to 11,000 divided by 70, or 157.1 AV, exiting the breakpoint. 2 breaks brings us to 171.4 AV, and 3 breaks is 185.7 AV. Now, if you clear a wave, this countdown resets its delay, which saves potential issues. So if you break 3 enemies wave 1, wave 2 will not have its countdown delayed no matter what. This is good. But there are still ways that it can hurt you. Breaking only 2 wave 1 enemies, for example 2 chunky elites, leaves us with 1 potential delay on wave 2 nonetheless, and any delay breaks the 0 cycle breakpoint from before. This isn't the end of the world, but it does remove an unenhanced skill from Firefly which was there for free from before and can be a whole bunch of damage. Even if you weren't aiming for 0 cycle clears, it could also just hurt your speed tuning that you might have done with the Dahlia and Dance procs, where we aim to act right after the combustion state normally ends. Now, it's not like we're losing out on enhanced skills, it's more that we're losing possible unenhanced skills in some places. It also makes speed tuning a real pain if we want to keep that synchronization on the ult end, where we act as close as possible to the combustion state ending. There are ways to use the new delay to your advantage. It can open up possible strong attack boot setups, allowing us to hit the same amount of turns as pre-Nova but with attack boots, and thus a bunch more break effect. It's not all bad, and for people who don't care for speed tuning, it might even make your life easier. Anyways, the final base kit change was a banger, boosting her innate super break multipliers from 50 to 150%, and reducing the break effect needed from 360% to 300%. This wasn't difficult to reach in her normal comps, but again, some alternative comps just got a massive upgrade. And going from 50 to 150% super break multiplier is tripling her innate multiplier. This isn't tripling her actual damage, as we have break damage, ally damage, and allies also provide super break multipliers, but it is quite a nice damage increase and makes her less dependent on super break specialists. Now, something I didn't expect to happen did happen, and that E2 did in fact get its cooldown removed. So now every turn we can proc the E2 just like we dreamed of back on release. This is an amazing damage increase provided you can actually activate the E2 every turn, which I mean is super easy in pure fiction at least, and makes her excel there. Sometimes you won't be able to proc it, so it won't always be much better than the previous E2, but it being available every turn helps drastically for quality of life, since there were times when you'd be able to activate it, but the cooldown was up and vice versa. Well, now that's gone. And sometimes you still might not want to proc it to allow bosses to move for mechanics, but most of the time this is just nutty. How convenient she got a banner coming up, huh? So overall, she got upgrades to her damage, more weakness implants, which is more damage too, and then more damage in her E2. She still needs Dahlia, and her talent and E3 to E5 are still pretty cosmetic, but she will last longer in the meta, especially at E2. There is also that combustion state delay, which can either be annoying to your current rotation and speed tuning or open up new possibilities and comfort. As always, I tried to calculate the buffs and their increases on the unit, and when adding in all the new changes, I got a 43% increase from pre-Nova to post-Nova Firefly. This is without considering the realistic potential gains or losses that her new delay could bring, as that is variable on the stage. Although I did put the delay into the sim and it is affecting her turns. So I could see the Novaflare being more like a 50% gain. And since her E2 got buffed, time to calculate that too. For comparison's sake, my old E1 to E2 gain on Firefly was 37.3%. That was considering every other turn activating the E2 effect every single time. Her new E2, provided every single turn you can proc it, is now a 71.9% gain, which makes sense, that is pretty close to double what I previously found. But remember, my old calc didn't have Dahlia. It won't actually end up being this every time in combat, but on top of the base kit buffs, E2 post-Novaflare looks to be an estimated 2.69 times stronger than E0 pre-Novaflare in an extended fight, and again permanently proccing the E2. Not bad at all, but that doesn't mean you need to pull E2 Firefly. Her E0 performance is still top tier with Dahlia in the current meta, and now she got a nice buff. Anyways, her relic and planar sets remain the same as before. Cavalry and Forge did not change, and we got nothing else new for break since my last video on her. As for her speed goals, well, in the case you don't have the break delay on wave 2, so you break 3 enemies wave 1, or the Dahlia breakpoints from before still stand. Depending on DDD procs and speed, not counting the Dahlia speed buff, here's how much you need for as many actions possible into an unenhanced skill into ult into new combustion before 150 AV. Delays will ruin this though. Since your combustion state could be delayed on wave 2, you could then instead optimize for action counts within 150 AV rather than optimizing around the combustion end. However, considering the Dahlia breakpoints are trying to reach a turn before 150 AV already, you could just keep your pre-Nova speed and you'll be in the combustion state rather than exiting it and re-entering it. In fact, you could even drop a bit of speed because this was considering you lose the 60 from combustion. In Anomaly Arbitration, you're looking at the 300 AV breakpoint instead, and if you want to hit 7 enhanced skills in that breakpoint considering 3 delays, you could aim for 157 speed. This is menu speed, so before Dahlia's 30% and without DDD. If you're likely running Dance Spam since it's so OP, or Bronya if E2 Firefly, and so breakpoints won't really matter here, they're too variable. And Epoch Shadow doesn't really have anything, instead you'll probably tune around the stage itself if you care enough for the highest AV clear. So speed breakpoints from Firefly from now on will just be whatever your stage calls for if you want maximum optimization. I mean, it already was, but we had the generic Dahlia ones, which won't always be perfectly tuned anymore. For Lycones, it's still between Finance, Sig, and her own, Finance being best if you want to hit super high speed breakpoints for extra actions, since it gives base speed that multiplies with the Dahlias and raw maze buffs. Her own is still just fine if you have it, no need to pull for another cone, and On the Fall of an Eon is also excellent as always. Her Sig is still an unnecessary pull, especially when stuff like E2 Firefly and E1 S1 Dahlia exist. And finally, teams haven't really changed either at E0, but support priority has. The Dahlia is still a mandatory pull for Firefly lovers. You'll pair them together with your choice of 1 to 2 break supports between Harmony MC, Raw May, and Fugue. Raw May E1 actually is pretty strong again, considering Firefly got buffs to her innate super break and thus relies less on Harmony MC or Fugue's power, and her help to survivability is underappreciated sometimes, even with the amount of breaks and delays the team has. Now, the other unit's utility, like the DDD spam from Harmony MC or Fugue's Exo Toughness, especially for easy E2 procs, are still important, and the stage can change priority, so do not take these next team recommendations as always correct. For MNC and AS and an E0 Firefly, I would generally rock Harmony MC and E1 Raw May as your buddies. If you need RMC or Raw May elsewhere, well, Fugue remains useful to help replace either of these slots. For Pure Fiction though, I would rock Harmony MC and Fugue, as their power combined with Dance 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 Spam is too strong for this mode. Sustainers Firefly is part of the reason she's so strong right now, but if you need to run a sustain in these modes, then any good old sustain works, including the classic break ones, Gallagher and Linksha. In these cases, you wouldn't put in Raw May as we'd prioritize the super break provided by Harmony MC or Fugue in the 3rd slot. Now for Firefly E2, it gets a little sussy. I talked about Bronya back in 2.3 as a fun sustainless option, and she has been used pre-Novaflare with the Dahlia, but it now got a big buff. Bronya has occasional attack percent buffs, 100% advance, the possibility of advancing other units including harmonies. She's a possible dance user, or can use the Battle Pass break cone. E2 could lead to speed breakpoints. There's possible syncing optimization with her talent basic attacks, and finally, reducing the time between E2 procs was also nice pre-Nova. But now, with E2 being available every turn on Firefly, well, those 100% advances are pretty balling now. Every Bronya action could be another 2 Firefly actions. Of course, it's hard to perfectly tune, so you're not straight up doubling turns, but it's not bad. And a previous problem she had was the 360% break effect Gold Firefly needed to hit her strongest super rate multipliers. Well, first they gave a free 25% break effect, and then they reduced the needs, and then they made the multipliers stronger anyway, so everything's looking peachy. If you can proc E2 every turn, Bronya is an absolute beast unit for Firefly's 4th slot. In Pure Fiction, you can prog it every turn, so enjoy a literally vaporizing PF right now. So go out there and let La Bronya be meta again. Otherwise, you still have Dahlia, Harmony of Sea, and Fugue or E1 Rollmate again for most content. Fugue does get a value boost though for Firefly E2 thanks to her extra toughness allowing for more potential E2 procs. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this Firefly Nova video. Let me know what you think of the changes and whether you're going to start using her again, or maybe you already did with the Dahlia. Thanks to my super YouTube members, thanks for watching and have a Guoba day.